Hello, I am Sullivan Wood and I will be proposing a strategic plan for the United States Department of Justice. First, I will analyze the current strategic plan, and then I will propose some changes for a new Department of Justice strategic plan. The purpose of this presentation is to inform which process I use to improve the strategic plan and the step-by-step guidance of how I accomplish this. Questions will be answered following the presentation. In order to understand the process entirely, we need to look at Bryson's 10-step strategic planning model. This planning model is a great tool to utilize when an organization wants to completely dissect all the necessary elements that promote success in the desired field. It allows for practically any organization to come to a conclusion about planning and implementation of new ideas. Throughout this presentation, I will reference this model many times as it was the foundation of my entire planning process. The first step is to initiate an agreed upon a strategic planning process. One of the key elements to this is establishing a desired end state. All stakeholders must first agree to the overarching goal they want to achieve and begin the planning process to reach that goal. It's extremely important that all factors are considered when beginning to develop a plan. One of the reasons is because the DOJ consists of over 116,000 workers, and the jobs that they do provide for millions of people across the United States. For the 2018 to 2022 period, the four strategic goals of the DOJ were: enhance national security and counter the threat of terrorism, secure the borders, and enhance immigration enforcement and education, reduce violent crime and promote public safety, promote rule of law, integrity, and good government. My recommended changes will improve all of the goals in some way. I used this SMART goal assignment to single out a specific goal that I want to implement in my improved strategic plan. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. My improved goal that I concluded on was to increase the training of agents within the Department of Justice in order to adapt to technological advances and deter rising terrorist threats to the United States. Step 2 is to identify organizational mandates. This is the entire organizational structure of the United States Department of Justice. By identifying the mandates of all the branches of the DOJ, it allows the planning to continue to operate within the guidelines of the department, while also following the rules laid out by those who remain above them. That includes Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court. Step 3 is to clarify the mission and values. The mission of the Department of Justice is to enforce the law and defend the interests of the United States according to the law, to ensure public safety against threats foreign and domestic, to provide federal leadership in preventing and controlling crime, to seek just punishment for those guilty of unlawful behavior, and to ensure fair and impartial administration of justice for all Americans. The core values are as follows: equal justice under law. Upholding the laws of the United States is the solemn responsibility entrusted to the Department of Justice by the American people. The Department enforces these laws fairly and uniformly to ensure that all Americans receive equal protection and justice. Honesty and integrity. The Department of Justice adheres to the highest standards of ethical behavior, cognizant that, as custodians of public safety, its motives and actions must be above reproach. Commitment to excellence. The Department seeks to provide the highest level of service to the American people. The DOJ is an effective and responsible steward of taxpayers' dollars. Respect for the dignity and worth of each human being. Those who work for the Department treat each other and those they serve with fairness, dignity, and compassion. They value differences in people and ideas. They are committed to well-being of employees and to provide opportunities for individual growth and development. My recommended changes follow and uphold the core values and the mission of the DOJ. Step 4 is to assess the organization's external and internal environments to identify the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I completed this process using environmental scanning in my SWOT analysis assignment. Strengths and weaknesses are defined as internal, and the opportunities and threats are external to the organization. The strengths that I identified here are intelligence sharing and the level of training that agents receive. Weaknesses are emerging threats and frequent policy changes. Opportunities are cyber partnerships and internal threats, internal threat mitigation. And for threats, we have terrorism and political tension rising. These are not the only strengths and weaknesses that I assess. However, I deem them the most important for the purpose of implementing the desired changes to the organization. Step 5 is to identify the strategic issues facing the Department of Justice. From identifying the problem, I came up with this question to compare the issues to the decision-making criteria. How does the DOJ deter more acts of terrorism by requiring additional training for field agents and cyber analysts? In the decision-making criteria assignment, I chose 4 criteria to represent that which was the most important to the organization and the changes. I also allocated weights to each criteria, indicating which ones will be valued the most. They are weighted 1 through 4, with 1 being the most valued and 4 being the least. These are what I decided on. First, I have cost, which I weighted a 4. How much will the proposed changes cost? Time, which I weighted at 2, ensuring that the changes don't take too long to implement. Effectiveness, I rated this the most important criteria. Will the proposed changes actually make a difference? And finally, necessity. What will be the consequence if the changes are not implemented? Step 6 is to formulate strategies to manage the issues. I used the strengths and weaknesses that I identified in order to construct alternatives for the identified issues. The alternatives shown were developed in my SWOT analysis using environmental scanning. I decided that the best option for my proposed changes would be to implement additional training for field agents on emerging terror threats, cyber warfare optimization, and learning the psychology behind terrorist attacks. The following are alternatives that I must decide from. Train all agents in the field as soon as possible and make training mandatory for all new agents. Grandfather in current agents and train only new agents. Implement online pre-recorded training classes so it doesn't take away from their duty time. And finally, live online training sessions mandatory for all agents at a few given times. Step 7 is to review and adopt the strategic plan. In order to do this, I used this chart in the decision criteria assignment to make the decision. On the x-axis, I have the decision criteria, and on the y-axis, I have the alternatives. I decided how each criteria would affect the alternatives, and I gave it a number 1 through 4, 1 being the most important. I then multiplied down, and I added the totals up on the right side. The least number means that it is mathematically the best option according to the weighted criteria. Based on the decision criteria matrix, the best alternative is to require all agents and analysts to complete an online pre-recorded, updated terrorist training course. This is the most effective and least time and money consuming way to make sure agents are trained in the most up-to-date criteria in order to save more lives in the future. Step 8 is to establish an effective organizational mission. In order to do this, I had to alter the original mission statement and draft a new one. The new mission statement is as follows. The mission of the Department of Justice is to enforce the law and defend the interests of the United States according to the law, to combat and deter emerging threats to the public, to provide federal leadership in preventing and controlling crime, to seek just punishment for those guilty of unlawful behavior, and to ensure fair and impartial administration of justice for all Americans. Step 9 is to develop an effective implementation process. This involves the stakeholders in the changes and the organization as a whole to decide how they want it to go. Since my plan is to implement follow-on training for emerging threats and capabilities, the most important aspect is the timeline in which it will be implemented. The following stakeholders will be the decision makers for this process. For internal stakeholders, I have the emerging threat specialists or instructors, and the chain of command to oversee and decide on a timeline for implementation of the training. For external to the DOJ, I have the President and Congress, who must approve this decision. The final step in Bryson's 10-step planning model is to reassess strategies and the strategic planning process. This will be done with a post-implementation analysis. The final step will be completed after the plan is implemented and there are clear results to analyze. In order for this to be successful, the same statistics that were collected before the implementation need to be analyzed afterwards. This will prevent any biases or analytical placebos from intervening. In conclusion, I first analyzed the current strategic plan and its values. Then I assessed the strengths and weaknesses in order to identify things that we can improve on. By comparing those with threats and opportunities, I was able to decide on an issue that the DOJ was facing. Next, I used the SWOT analysis to identify alternatives to implement. Finally, I used the decision criteria matrix to identify which alternative will be the best for our organization in the end. Thank you.